Okay, hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We are just getting started in another 30 seconds. All right. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you and welcome to the webinar titled Modernize Your ECM or Perish, presented by Newgen Software, a leading provider of content services, digital process automation, and customer communication management platform with a multitude of implementations across the globe. I'm Gunjan Kalita, and I shall be your host and the moderator for this webinar. Today, we have Cheryl McKinnon, Principal Analyst from Forrester Research, and Anurag Shah, Newgen's Head of Digital Products as our speakers. At the end of the presentation, we will be having a question and answer session. We request you to type your questions in the question window of your GoToWebinar anytime throughout it. I shall take them up at the end of the session with our experts. And with that, I hand it over to Cheryl to take us ahead.
Great, thank you so much, and happy to be a guest speaker on your webinar today. So let's kick things off. We've got a lot of material to cover. So modernize or perish, kind of dramatic, but I think we are at a really interesting point in the evolution of the broader content management market, and organizations have had to adapt to a lot of challenging circumstances over the last year or year and a half. So let's talk about where technology has taken us and some of the opportunities ahead of us as we think about modernizing our content management systems. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about why modernization is essential. It's kind of a cliche, but now more than ever, I think is really true. So many of our work habits have changed over the last couple of years. We'll spend a few minutes talking about the trends, the 5 key trends that are shaping the direction of ECM today. And we'll also wrap up with some of the key capabilities to look for in a modern content platform. So let's talk for a moment about why modernization is essential today. So we have all had to work through a number of really interesting and sometimes unfortunate disruptions over the last 18 months. It's disruption not only in our work environments, but our personal environments as well. Many of us have had to work out of our home offices now for many months. But we see disruptions in changing markets, changing buying habits, the way that we engage with our colleagues, our customers, our suppliers. All of this has changed. So disruption has caused many organizations now really rethink, well, what are the processes I need to put in place to take me forward? How does content help run these critical business processes? Businesses need to become adaptive. They need to be responsive to market changes, and they also need to really focus on the experiences of their employees to keep them engaged and satisfied in their work environments, as well as their customer experiences to make sure that they're able to continue to adapt to what their clients need. This idea of the adaptive enterprise is something that some of my colleagues at Forrester have been looking at over the last several months. An adaptive enterprise is one that needs to be able to be proactive, always forward thinking. How is my market changing? How are the goods and services that I offer need to be adapted? What are those customer needs? How are their business decisions changing? We also need to make sure that this adaptive enterprise does focus on the employee experience. We need to invest in our employees, ongoing training, making them more comfortable with the digital tools that we increasingly depend on, accesses to resources, including the information and knowledge that floats around our enterprises, both in content management systems, but also in the heads of the employees that we work with. We need to be able to reward employees for being flexible and being willing to embrace new things. And an adaptive enterprise is also one that invests in the technologies to help enable their quick business adaptivity. We know that markets are changing, habits are changing. Where can technology provide that solid underpinning to make sure that we survive not just this stress test that we've gone through, but the ones that may be around the corner? We're looking at what we call at Forrester the future fit. What are the technologies that help customers or organizations be ready for whatever the future may throw at them? This means organizations proactively plan and make the technology investments to become adaptive, but also creative and probably most importantly right now, resilient. We can withstand challenges and change. So when we talk about a future fit strategy, it means that we are thinking about a customer focused, a really customer obsessed approach to technology that helps a company quickly reconfigure its business structures, even its org chart, and its capabilities to meet those future customer and employee needs. And I really like these three key words of adaptivity, creativity, and resilience, because content really sits at the foundation of all three of those. So when we think about this evolution of ECM to more modern content platforms infused by these flexible content services to help us build the right solutions and processes and applications, content services fit here because this is a way that we can quickly reconfigure our business structures. We can adapt our process. We can get information to the right person at the right time. So I think there's a really nice connection here between modernization of our ECM thinking as well as this idea of the future fit technology. You know, I've been covering this market with Forrester for many years now, and I really have seen a fascinating change over the last decade or so. When I think about, what constitutes a modern content platform today, the thing you should be aspiring to change to, we really want these flexible components under the covers. So our business users, our designers, our architects, developers can use this, think of it as a painter's palette of services to deliver the right applications to the right users, which could be internal or external. We know that we need some of these foundational capabilities to be able to manage and store our documents, our processes, web pages. But we also need to serve up these capabilities to help us collaborate better, to share documents, to create project workspaces, transactional services that help us design process, get digital signatures into the hands of those who need it. Federation and integration services, we have to recognize that organizations typically have content all over their organization, and they rely on many other key enterprise applications, not only to generate content, but to use it in key financial systems, HR management systems, customer relationship management systems. And some of the new elements we've seen come into the content management world over the last several years, an increased infusion of intelligent content services such as machine learning, artificial intelligence, and advanced analytics. These are those building blocks that we can assemble and extend to create all of those applications that are going to create really important business value for the organizations that we work with, whether that's accounts payable and invoice processing or employee file management for an HR team. With that context in mind, knowing that we need to be adaptive, creative, and resilient, let's talk about how we see the shift in the content management market. Now, every year, I do a bit of what we call a panel survey at Forrester. And that's really taking the pulse of how content management decision makers and program leaders, what are they doing with their programs? And so in 2021, we asked the question once again, what are some of the most important capabilities or reasons for investing in content management? And it's really interesting that year over year, we see digitization of business process up at the top once again. It's been a perennial leader, and one of the reasons that we see continued health in the content management market. A lot of organizations continuing to refine, extend, and make new investments. The second most important reason to invest is cost-effective automation. I think if we look at how many organizations have survived, this year of the pandemic, it's not just about digitizing remaining paper or manual-based tasks, but where can we automate, where it makes sense, and do it in a cost-effective way so that we can get our employees much more productive as quickly as possible. And what's a little interesting here in 2021 is that we see once again regulatory and legal compliance come up into the top 3 reasons for investing in content management. And I think that that's really important because we do see that the global market for data protection privacy has really increased as well. If we think about the top struggles, so what are the challenges facing content management program leaders today? A new number 1 comes up in 2021, and that's a lack of coordinated governance. Meaning, how do we get our business leaders, our technical leaders, our compliance leaders on the same page in terms of prioritizing how we care for information, how we protect it, and how we ensure that we're meeting those legal and regulatory requirements? So we're keeping things for the right period of time. We're securing things if they need to be. That's becoming a top struggle, again, as we see a rise across the globe in data protection and privacy legal changes. Second and third top challenges, lack of expertise and implementation, and third is migrating content from older systems. And I think if we think about some of the reasons why we need to modernize, when we think about older on-premises systems, perhaps we've been deploying the same tools for a decade or even more in some cases. It's going to be harder and harder to find those skill sets to move from those older systems or to develop applications on top of them. So I think one of the key reasons why we do need to think about modernization today is the skill sets, could continue to decline on older systems as those experts retire from the workforce. So let's talk about these 5 trends shaping the content services evolution. These are ones that I update every year, so these are the highlights for 2021. The first is that machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to continue to power content services for really tangible use cases. Now, this is a trend that we've been tracking for several years now, but I think we are at a bit of a turning point as we look into late 2021 and into 2022. We could start seeing some more widespread adoption. Vendors have been great about innovating and adding some of these to their content management stacks, but now we need to see more widespread adoption to get to those cost-effective automation use cases. So we're starting to see more packaged and pre-trained AI and machine learning models for common use cases. Many of us have seen some really good results in things like invoice processing, extracting the data from things like incoming PDF invoices and training the system to recognize repeatable patterns. Well, now can we expand that into other repeatable document types, automate categorization, and so on? We're also seeing the rise of graph technology, so understanding how people collaborate and communicate and providing smarter recommendations. What documents should I read next? And another use case for AI machine learning, can we have pre-packaged algorithms basically trained to detect things like PII, credit card data, social insurance or social security numbers, and so on. The second trend that we're tracking is that we see, again, here's that term resilient. Cloud content platforms are going to be essential as we continue to build this foundation for remote and hybrid work, which is probably here to stay for many organizations, or at least part of their workforces. When we look at some of the challenges that have faced organizations over the last 18 months, some of those early pain points in early 2020 were a result of antiquated systems, old systems that were hard to access through web and mobile apps. People that needed to work from home literally overnight often struggled to get to their corporate systems in those early days and weeks. So we do see that the shift to cloud has really become an enabler of sustaining remote and hybrid work. So we expect to see that continue to grow. Sorry. The third trend is that we see this idea of the content microprocess will continue to connect external stakeholders to your internal essential workflows. Now, what I mean by that is we're seeing an increasing number of content management use cases that start to embrace those outside users, whether it's customers, suppliers, partners, your law firm, your ad agency, whatever that might be. And we may have perhaps a 10-step workflow internally to open a new case or process a claim. But at certain points of that workflow, we need to reach out to those external parties, a new customer, a new supplier, someone submitting a case application, filling out a form. We need to bring that information from the outside into our internal workflows and business processes. And we've started to call those little outreaches, those little parts of the workflow that extend to your customer, your outside stakeholder, a content microprocess. So that could be something like an e-signature or a request for information. That again, it continues to be facilitated by the shift to cloud platforms. The fourth trend that we're tracking is this resurgence of interest in knowledge management. Now, this has been one of those use cases where content management plays an important role, not the only technology to support initiatives like this, but certainly one of the foundational technologies. And we see that organizations are really starting to understand, hey, we need to get our arms around all of this intellectual property, all of these best practices, all of this work that we've done in the past, making sure it's available to those who need to move that work forward. And so this has become a really hot topic in customer inquiry, particularly over the last year. And the fifth and final trend that we're tracking is what's happening with the future of documents themselves. We are starting to see some innovation in terms of how we author content, how we create it, how modular it might become, how much structure we can embed in it. So it's much easier to reassemble and reuse it. So I think that that's going to really help us rethink content management because documents themselves are starting to change. So we'll just spend a little bit of time on each of these. You know, when we talk about the trend around AI and machine learning adoption, we're still we're in early days, so it's an aspirational goal. But I think over the next year, we are going to start to see, you know, at least half of program teams start to use it to some extent, particularly, as I mentioned, as vendors step up with more packaged offerings as part of their content management platforms. We talked a moment ago about the move to software as a service, and you know we've got some data that shows that this tipping point has certainly already happened. Some of this data here is coming from our Forrester Analytics and Data team. We do a very large-scale annual software survey, and this just talks about how content management programs are beginning to bring more software as a service delivery models into the mix. So right now we see that 41% of organizations are using SaaS to some extent, with a further 23% planning to predominantly replace their existing on-prem systems with SaaS over the next 12 months. So we do tend to see this happening in a phased approach. So we're complementing existing on-prem systems or perhaps private cloud deployments with software as a service with a goal to eventually replace it entirely. So we do, this is not a rip and replace. It really is a phased approach to the shift to cloud and SaaS applications. And I think we really do need to consider this shift to cloud as some of the key underpinnings if we're going to build this resilient organization for the future. Early in the pandemic response, we actually did a piece of research that looked at some of these essential technologies to help organizations survive and then get back into a safe return to work mode. And the four categories of kind of these essential technologies that we found were risk and crisis management tools, customer experience technologies, employee experience and HR management tools, and health and safety technologies. And you may notice that we see content management show up in a few places here, both in terms of moving to cloud content platforms, the use of transactional content services, things like task management, e-signature, automated document generation, as well as collaboration tools. So, we're really laying a future foundation here. The other thing that's really come to the table, and we know that we saw very high adoption rates of many of the team collaboration tools in early 2020. A number of companies I talked to, fast-tracked their adoption of whether it was Microsoft Teams or Zoom or the Google tools because they had to essentially operate from a home office literally overnight in many cases. And this whole shift, both in terms of the new tools that we're adopting, quickly revealed that, hey, we've got all these new sources of content that we maybe hadn't thought through the governance, the management, the capture of some of these new content types coming out of this proliferation of digital meeting tools. All of these digital conversations could be chats in terms of text messaging, threaded conversations, but there's also the video, the audio, and the transcripts that may be coming out of those digital conversations. So we spent 2020, those early months, quickly adopting these tools, sometimes ahead of the scheduled roadmap, but then the latter part of 2020, catching up on the governance issues. Do we need to capture some of these recorded meetings? Could they be long-term records we need to preserve? Do we keep the video perhaps a shorter time than the transcript? A lot of these questions really started to come out, and this is where I think, to their credit, many of the content management vendors have quickly adapted to managing, video files, doing things like transcription extraction, and stepping up in terms of supporting a lot of these new sources of business content. When I mentioned that idea of the content microprocess as one of the key trends, this is really an illustration of what we mean. More and more organizations have recognized that, a digital way of engaging with their customers, their suppliers and vendors, again, was a necessity in 2020. Any paper-based or manual process literally broke overnight. My colleague Rob Koplowitz at Forrester wrote an awesome paper that talked about that very point. Basically, COVID broke your process. And so, even organizations that perceive themselves as fairly mature in terms of this digitization of business or this shift to digital first work, we also saw, some cracks in the process. So we recognize that there's still work to be done. And so when we think about this idea of reaching out to our external parties, whether they're customers, suppliers, et cetera, we need to request forms. So we may bring that in, digitize the information. We may request supporting documentation, proof of identity. And then ultimately, when we conclude that claim or that contract, whatever it might be, we want to ask them for that digital signature. So think of these moments as we cross from business to business or business to customer as these content microprocesses. The fourth trend I mentioned was also around this whole resurgence of the interest in knowledge management. And I think this is particularly important because, as some of the research from Forrester's Employee Experience Index shows, there's actually a high degree of relationship between employees who describe themselves as highly engaged in their work and their satisfaction with things like the collaboration technologies their company provides them, or satisfied that they have access to the information they need to do their job accordingly. In fact, that satisfaction with the information that they need to get their job done, that's actually the highest indicator of someone who describes himself as highly engaged. So access to information, the ability to collaborate, the ability to get what they need, again, strong signals of highly engaged employees. So this matters. Also, when we think about knowledge management, it's about making sure that we are taking care of those information assets that are going to help us push our business forward. There's a lot of noise out there, whether it's email or copies of draft documents, and we know that as part of many of our compliance and governance objectives, we want to make sure that we're getting rid of things that have a low level of business value. Make sure that we're thinking about our records and information management policies and executing accordingly. But the flip side of that is, as we get rid of the junk, it means we start to have more clarity about what value other information types have. The ability to go back to project plans. Perhaps we put something on the back burner in 2019. Well, that project's coming back to life. Wouldn't it be good to know exactly where that is, pick up from where that previous team left off, and not have to redo all of the work? When we think about longer term knowledge assets, contracts, RFPs, examples of good research that we want to hold on to, the inputs to intellectual property or patents, we want to make sure all of that is taken care of. And the fifth trend, as I mentioned, is all about just rethinking the world of the document authoring experience in itself. We really haven't changed all that much in the 30 years that we've been working with office productivity tools. This term, it's one of my favorite words. I learned it a few years ago. Skeuomorphism is basically that design representation of something in its physical world and transferring that into the world of digital. And we've really done that in the world of content management. We use phrases or words like files and folders and pages and labels. So we're taking that language of paper and we've just adapted it to our digital work environment. And that was useful for a while, but I think it's now starting to impose some limitations on where we can go. Do we need to think more about data in the context of documents, more structure in the context of documents? So I think we're ready for some fresh thinking about the authoring experience itself. So some of the shifts we're expecting to see, it may take 5 to 7 years, but where we see more AI, robots sharing the writing credits in our documents, so robots as authors. Will we see more structured data surrounding content and helping us parse it out more effectively so we can repurpose it for different audiences or different use cases? We think there will be a role for blockchain, distributed ledger technology, perhaps in some records management use cases. And it means that governance and the traditional lifecycle management may actually get a little messy from time to time because we will have to adapt to more componentized modular approaches to document authoring. So we will start to see this evolve. So let's just end this portion of the presentation with a few characteristics of a modern content platform. Now, in June of this year, we actually published the latest edition of the Forrester Wave for enterprise content management. We called it Content Platforms in Q2 2021. And if we look at some of the core capabilities, the things that really stood out to me in this era is that we're really starting to think more about the shift to cloud and how that actually eliminates some of the traditional barriers we had to things like scale. So we're starting to see really interesting, fresh approaches as vendors move into cloud architectures. We're starting to see the infusion of more of these intelligent content services, as I mentioned, AI, machine learning, knowledge or social graphs, again, to understand, collaboration and engagement patterns and surface those up for smarter recommendations or pattern detection. And I think really more interesting is really coming into the definition of a content platform. So away from the monolithic architectures of the ECM of the last couple of decades into much more flexible platforms that give us those design tools, those developer tools to help us deliver the right applications to the right users within our own organization. So coming out of that wave just recently, we published a report just summarizing like the 5 lessons that we've learned. And the first is, that we have seen the cloud really kind of take over. So for, new deployments, new customers adopting ECM for the first time, or for those of you who are modernizing and, moving into this next era, cloud is now the dominant delivery models for pretty much every vendor. The second lesson is that customer adoption of AI machine learning is still in relatively early stages. But I do think that looking into 2022, as we see vendors start to package up more of these pre-trained models, we're going to start to see adoption start to grow. Lesson 3, verticals really matter. When we talk to the vendors and when you start looking at your own modernization efforts, really understand, where does that particular vendor and their partners and their services teams have strength in the verticals that are most important to you. If you're in public sector, banking, insurance, retail, where do they have a track record? That's increasingly important. The fourth lesson is that a lot of the basics, things that we expected from ECM vendors, again, probably 20 years ago, are now table stakes. All of the vendors do well. So we need to look at those areas of differentiation, such as technology pace of innovation, the ability to deliver low code and no code design and development tools. Just storage, that's very much a table stakes capability. Those basics of the library services, the repository services, that's something that we've kind of solved that problem. We're now looking for things like interoperability, more federation, more ability to integrate to enterprise applications. And the fifth lesson learned is Customers really want to be able to understand transparency. So understanding what's in those bundles, the pricing models, the integration efforts, and the access to professional services, whether through certified partners or through the vendor's own services. So this is something that customers are really asking about, just making sure they're really clear about what they're buying into. So with that, I'll turn it back to our hosts at Newgen, and I'll be back for questions.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. I mean, that was truly insightful. And I also learned a beautiful concept in skeuomorphism to borrow off it. So thank you. And now with that, I invite Anurag to give us a glimpse into how Newgen has been aiding this modernization motion. Anurag.
You're able to hear me now, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you, Gunjan. And that was a great insight from Cheryl. I will maybe take a couple of leaf from there while I'm presenting my viewpoint and slides. So hello to everyone. What Cheryl talked about is the modernization of the ECM and the requirements, the future fit, the constituents, the key trends, and several such things. What I'm going to talk about in next about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes is how do those translate into a real world examples. I'm going to take a couple of case studies as well. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah. So if you see now the digital transformation initiatives, they go beyond the platform modernization, and Cheryl beautifully explained and touched upon it. Improving customer and employee experience certainly is at the top. Making it frictionless is a real big one for all of us, for all the enterprises. But it is just the one of the initiatives. I mean, there are other goals: the rapid application development, IT transformation, and modernization. Uninterrupted remote access with complete security. So to achieve these initiatives, what you really need is a platform with the, of course, modern content, services, and workflow, supporting low-code application development. All of the, Cheryl talked about the future fit and the constituents which are integral part of it. The tools and capabilities for improving customer and employee experience, the tools like mobile, the portal, collaboration, self-services. And on top of it, you add things like content analytics, the intelligence, making it more relevant, making it more hyper automation, deploying it on cloud, making hybrid, the microservices based architecture, DevSecOps, emphasizing the need to build a security foundation within the DevOps, web services, open APIs, continuous enrichment of the integration catalogs, more and more standards and out-of-the-box integration adapters, the continuous and enhanced monitoring of the platform itself for high availability and uninterrupted continuous uses. So all of this in a single and unified digital automation platform, not just to solve for your IT transformation and rapid application development, but also your customer and employee experience need, what they need from this. So if you look at Newgen 1 for digital transformation initiatives, you see it has a layer for core content services at the bottom with communication services combined with it. And then business process automation is on top of it. The low code application development environment comes next to combining both of these two layers, and all leading edge technology and capabilities, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, analytics, for both process as well as the content. And then you have this multi-experience user interface coming from the low-code application development environment with utilizing all of these technologies. What all of these allow you to do is to configure and develop those business applications across industries, digital business applications across industries, financial institutions, government, public sector, insurance, shared services, several others. I'm going to touch upon this in a little bit detail in my upcoming slides. And these business applications are catering to use cases for all the constituents of the process or the content, the employees who are your internal participants, customers and partners who are coming from external world. So these business applications are engaging with both internal and external participants and constituents. And of course, with integrated ecosystem and on cloud. So this is really the stack, a unified platform that is cloud hosted, a single platform, scalable and extensible, secured, highly available, and at the same time auditable, capable of delivering deep insights, great analytics, and used by enterprises to rapidly develop and deploy those complex and critical business applications, performing millions of transactions, handling billions of documents in different shapes and forms of the content. Cheryl talked about the audio, the video, the transcripts, all of those, and all of this with the pandemic year that we have experienced, to enable your remote access to the hundreds and thousands of employees accessing your system and the processes. So if you see this Newgen One digital transformation platform, there are a couple of things which stand out and comes out. One is obviously the unification. The platform that you need for the modernization of whether we want to call it modernization or the modern content services or the digital transformation, it needs to combine three essential pillars of the business processes: the content, certainly, the processes, and the communication through which you engage with your all the stakeholders, customers, partners, and employees. And all of these three taken together in a low code and no code kind of environment should allow the enterprises to develop and deploy those complex and content driven customer engaging business applications quickly and on cloud. And the third thing here is, from the customer onboarding, I mean, look at the use cases: customer onboarding, service requests, financial institutions, lending, insurance, underwriting. So, and I'm going to touch upon these things in a little bit more detail, but the point is, no matter how complex your processes is, how are you unlocking the simplicity within those complex processes, breaking it down with the context of the process in which those are being done, with the speed as well as the agility? How are you able to, Cheryl talked about adaptive enterprise, how everybody, the enterprises need to be adaptive to technology, to the process, to the customer demand and the situation. So how agile you are while you are dealing with these complex processes, while you are dealing with these complex content, the higher and higher demands of the customers on the experience and the services. Let's look at one case study. It is a Fortune 500 insurance company. This is a claims department which typically takes care of those lawsuits, the class action lawsuits, which runs into months and years, and it primarily constitutes of the lawyers and attorneys, with some representation from the finance, some representation from other departments as well. But the nature of their work is such that in these kind of class action lawsuits, there are the content so far before the implementation of the content services platform, when you look at the way they were working in the physical world, and it is before pandemic, so they would have these physical folders with hundreds and hundreds of pages, sometimes running into thousands of pages, depending on how long the case is running. If it is running for a couple of years, then obviously the pile of papers would be much higher. And when you open the cover of those folders, those physical folders, on the inside left folder of the cover of the folder, you would see those table of content kind of cheat sheet, audit trail, where handwritten notes are there, that it would show you the dates, it would show you the work done, and it would show you the annotation on the section on which a certain lawyer or certain attorney or certain finance person did work. And then on those hundreds of pages on the right side of the folder, you would see several post-its and stickies sticking out all over all three directions of the folder, indicating what work has been done. If there are annotations done, when you turn over those pages, you would see additional annotations, additional notations. And all of these, not only for the internal processing, these files are required to be produced in the court of law. Certain section or all sections are required to be produced in front of the judge when there are hearings and those kind of things. And this several copies of the same pages of the same file are created, which travel from desk to desk. When we looked at such kind of process, such kind of physical world, and we tried to transform that entire process into the virtual and physical, virtual and digital world, to start with and this by the way, this process has been going on for decades. It is not something which has come up in last 1 or 2 years or last few years. This is going on for last so many decades, because these accent suits and these are the insurance companies managing for several years. When we talked about creating and transforming everything into digital, there was hardly any belief and there was hardly any buy-in that this can be done. And think about the persona of the users, the attorneys and lawyers, who are so specific, who are so particular in the way they work, in the way they look at a page, a document, in the way they annotate the notation, the notes, and the way they want to refer when there is a court hearing, when there is a representation in front of the judge. So when you take all of these things together and to convert it into a digital transformation was a huge and paradigm shift. What we did with Newgen 1, not only we converted these physical pages, but we mimicked that physical real world of writing on post-its, writing on those sticky notes, writing those date-wise annotation, that on such and such date I looked into this section and I made those notations. We converted those entire thing into electronic. Today, those attorneys, when they go into those kind of files electronically within Newgen 1, they're able to see those hundreds of documents, they're able to see the files, but at the same time, they're also able to see the aggregated view of all the notes and annotations date-wise in a separate view. They can click on one of the annotation, one of the note, one of the audit, and it will directly take the user to the respective page or section from those hundreds of pages, taking them to what they want to do. If they want to extract certain pages for submission to the court, or certain sections, or the entire export, they are able to do it with a click of a button. And earlier, what they used to do is, from those 500 pages, they would extract those 300 pages, send it for copying. Today, everything is done. It is secured, password secured, encrypted, put it on a drive, and send it to the clerk in the court. So if you see how the paradigm shift happened from working on a physical document-based folder, traveling desk to desk, getting copied multiple times to this entire digital world, in which today the attorneys sitting from their office are able to collaborate with each other. They are able to share their notes, keep certain notes secured to only for their own eyes, versus ones which are restrictive and the ones which are public to the others departments. All of those rights are being maintained, driven. They are no longer required to have a separate private copies with their private notes and then restricted copy for restricted audience. So all of those are taken out of the process. So if you this was one of the transformational implementation and project that we have done, I wanted to share with you. I will quickly take one more case study and then I'll try to conclude in about 5 to 7 minutes to take care of the questions. This is another case study where I wanted to talk about digital policy servicing. This is a large annuities, closed block annuities insurance company where they are servicing several hundreds of request types coming in from the policyholders, coming in from the producers, the agents on behalf of the policyholders. And these requests are in different nature. They could be financial nature, where somebody is sending monthly contributions or bi-weekly contributions or quarterly contributions to apply for their policies or those things, or it could be non-financial in nature. Maybe somebody is moving and want to change the address, or there is a claim, somebody wants to claim, or somebody wants to withdraw, somebody wants. So there are hundreds, I mean, I think it is more than a couple of hundred types of, or maybe more than 100 types of requests, which come in, again, different shape and form. Somebody may go to the, if it is a little bit tech savvy policyholder or the agent, they might go to the web page of this insurance company, download certain form, fill it up and upload through the portal. Others may just write an email that I want to do these things, so the request is in a written body of the email. The others may just download the form, fill it with hand, take a picture, scan it, attach it with email or fax it. Somebody could just write a letter and mail it physically. So you see, there are different ways of getting these requests in. And the way they were processing all of these, they had created about 150 different workflows to take care of these different request types, couple of hundred request types. They were managing it through two different legacy applications, isolated, disjointed, all of these different types of content, email, fax, web submissions, physical mails, somebody calling on the contact center, and then contact center creating that request. All of these were scattered across 4 different legacy repositories, running into about a couple of 100 million content documents. From there, we transformed this, again, this entire process into digital within flat 8 months, with all those legacy repositories transformed and migrated into one consolidated repository. In fact, the migration was done within 4 months itself. The 150 workflows, we looked at it, we worked with business and operations, and we found ways to simplify it. We found ways to optimize all several of those. So if you recall one of the my earlier slide where I mentioned about unlock that simplicity on the complex processes that you are doing. So we rationalized all of those more than 150 workflows in less than 15 simplified and optimized business process workflows. So today, when the request comes in through email, there is a straight email connector which puts it into the business process management. It understands based on certain artificial intelligence and machine learning based extraction of the email subject and few things, and tries to understand which queue it should belong to. If it is, let's say, coming a call into a contact center, there is a different interface for the contact center an ergonomic interface designed which allows the contact center agents to quickly verify the caller by asking certain questions. It integrates with underlying policy admin systems, quickly fetches and pulls certain information for the contact center agent. If possible, straight through on the call the requests are served. If not, those requests again route through the workflow queues within the ops team. If let's say physical paper come in through the mail or faxes, those are scanned, and again certain intelligent extraction are done on those, barcodes are read. So a lot of such human interventions were taken away. The complex nature of the content handling were taken as an ingestion channel, and then it went into the process where instead of the users looking at the document earlier and processing, we turned that entire experience and working as a knowledge worker. Now the system was using those technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, extraction, identification, and all of those. Data were presented in an intelligent way for the case workers to take those decisions, to make those recommendations, and then it would integrate with underlying policy admin system. There were 2 policy admin systems. It would integrate with those to pull, match certain data, see everything is good, when and when the approval is done, again push the data back into those for downstream and upstream activities to be done. So if you see with all of these, the benefits that were realized were multifold. I mean, lower cost certainly was one of the top one, because this was a pure operations driven business initiative, which for the transformation. But in addition, but at the same time, I mean, lowering the cost, the efficiency was improved, and most of all, they wanted to have a stable and configurable platform, not for the current problem, but strategically the company is in the business of acquiring multiple such closed block annuities from different insurance companies. When they do that with the blocks, it also comes the different policy admin system. So if let's say they are acquiring a block from an insurance company which has, let's say, a couple of million or a few million policies, the data of those policies, the document and content of those policies, wherever those are residing in those insurance companies, those will come along with it. So here the operations was very, very keen to have a platform which can connect to those future incoming policy admin systems, future incoming repositories, which could be of different shape, of different form, which could be scattered. So that was a kind of strategic vision that the company had to solve the current problem, but keep an eye for future expansion and future upgrades. So those were a few of the benefits that they saw. So if you really see on this Newgen One platform, it is not limited to one set of stakeholders or participants or constituents from to help and to serve their needs. It includes customers, it includes partners, it allows you to respond to your vendors on various aspects of them, your internal employees, starting from onboarding to their various HR and admin related processes, and then of course your internal processes concerning those employees. So you would be able to use this platform. I mean, our enterprises have been able to use this platform for all these different taking care of all these different stakeholders. And I took a couple of examples from the insurance, but we have customers in all these different verticals where domain rich applications, processes, and accelerators have been developed and implemented for them, be it banking and we again saw this in the year of pandemic. The federal government came up with this paycheck protection program, the financial stimulus under CARES Act, where small businesses were given those loans as part of the Paycheck Protection Program, and also later on those were there was a process for forgiving. So starting from there to giving the online account opening, online lending, compliances, and same thing if you look at shared service centers, accounts payable. Cheryl talked about invoice processing, and those again AI ML based capabilities like reading those invoices. And again, the invoices, if you are a big enterprise having thousands and thousands of suppliers and vendors from different parts of the country and the world, and if you have got plants and facilities across different geographies, you would have thousands of different types of invoice. Somebody may put vendor name and address on the top left, somebody may put in the right left, somebody may put in the center, and the line items on the invoices. So how you are not only able to extract but also read that intelligently, go back to the underlying system, ERP, SAP, Oracle, or whatever you are running, match those with those, find out the relevant purchase order, find out the goods received note, match two-way, three-way, four-way, get those straight through ones out of the way, get those exceptions once into certain knowledge workers keys. So all of those things, taking care of the utilizing those technological advances within the platform, low code and no code. With that, I would take a pause and see if we have got questions. I may have overshot by 2 or 3 minutes. Gunjan, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anurag, for the wonderful overview of the Newgen platform. We do have some questions here. We'll just take it up. And Cheryl, if you're there as well.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so the first question that we have, and this is probably right around our wheelhouse, and are we still using the ECM title? Any thoughts on the CSP or Content Services Platform title that seems to be taking over?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really good one. So I tend to kind of look at those three kind of terminologies in terms of layers. I still tend to use the broad term enterprise content management, ECM, when we're talking about kind of the market as a whole. When we are talking about specific platforms in terms of an offering, in terms of integrated services, that's when I tend to use the term content platform. So, this is kind of the current state of the ECM market, cloud ready, cloud first content platforms, designed for modern business use cases. These platforms are composed of content services, and we kind of talked through some of those in terms of the collaborative content services, the library services, transactional content services. So that's kind of the three layers that I look at it. So, big picture market, I still tend to use the term ECM. It's still very recognizable in the market. But when we talk about, the modern state of, how these tools are deployed, that's when I use the term content platforms.
Perfect. That is a great explanation around it. And another question, this is also from Cheryl's part that has come in. We just heard about knowledge management, but in most cases, knowledge management is myopic, BU specific, that is business user specific, and maintained on different platforms, shape and form. So when we talk about KM across the business landscape and BUs, should that be seen business process down or existing data / knowledge structure up?
Yeah, another very good question. So when I use the term knowledge management, I tend to think of it not as a piece of technology, but as a strategy, right? It's a way that an organization thinks about itself in terms of how it values and protects and shares and distributes, all of that collected wisdom in both documents as well as, what's in the employees' heads. But in terms of the actual deployment of then tools or solutions to help with, very tactical problems, then I tend to think of knowledge management, in a line of business or for a particular role. Just a couple of examples. My colleague Kate Leggett here at Forrester covers knowledge management specifically in the context of customer service and support centers. And, there's a group of, purpose-built tools specifically for that use case. If we look at things like a law firm, for example, they might have knowledge management specifically for precedent management. So, I tend to look at it again in a couple of layers. Big picture strategic objective for an organization, but the actual deployment or execution may be different tools for very different use cases.
Brilliant. That should answer the question, and that is actually how it should be. Anurag, you mentioned that process and content are like two sides of the same coin. To modernize one, you need to modernize the other two. Like, how are enterprises approaching this aspect?
Yeah, that is great. In fact, if you recall both of my case studies that I talked about, the nature and the complexity of the content is certainly one part of it which must be taken care of while we are doing the modernization of the ECM, or we are calling it content services platform. But it is only job half done. What enterprises today are seeking is those modernized content, how those in the context of the process are being presented to the knowledge manager. Look at an insurance company's business. I mean, if there is a life insurance policy, and it is living for 20 years, 30 years in that insurance company, and within last 20 years of the life of the policy, there will be hundreds of transactions and engagements with the policy holder, with the agents, for one or the other different aspects. Today, when a new request comes in, whether it relates with three past requests, one may have been last year, another may have been 3 years back, and the third may have been 10 years back. If all of those three are required to be looked upon to make justice to today's request, and not go back to the policyholder saying that, hey, can you give, what did you do 3 years back, how did you take care of this 5 years back? So bringing all of those into the context of the process which is being done today on the request becomes important. And that's where I mean, Cheryl talked about so beautifully the content, the micro content microprocesses and the essential capabilities. All of those tie in so ergonomically and beautifully within the context of the process that the organizations are doing. And that's what I actually meant.
Perfect. Thank you, Anurag. And in respect to the time that we have, I'll just take up just a final question, and this is for Cheryl. For modernizing their ECM systems, so what is the suggested playbook for any organization?
That's a good one. I would probably recommend that they look at a couple different things. So one is, where are there, particular pain points or bottlenecks in a line of business or in a existing workflow. So where's there opportunity to show, quick results and get a positive win. The second thing I would look at is, what is the organization's overall modernization strategy? So where have they already moved to cloud? Where have they not? What applications have been moved to cloud? What are the other key applications that are producing or using content? And start to create a roadmap in terms of where can you kind of find those high risk or high reward use cases where you can improve things. Our data tells us that more and more organizations are moving to more agile development and project management techniques for their content management program. So, finding those quick wins and building on that strength and success, I think, is the way to go.
Perfect. And with that, we are at the end. And thank you, Cheryl and Anurag. We really appreciate your time and all the
My pleasure.
valuable insights you brought here. Newgen will send across a copy of the recording to all the registrants by tomorrow. And those who were not able to share their questions today, please feel free to send them over via email. And with that, thank you again and have a great rest of the day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.